Okay.
So yeah, we'll do it that way.
Okay. My name is Jerome LaPointe Sr. My Winnebago name is HoChunk. It means laying up high. It's a clan name of the Snake Clan of the Winnebago tribe. My father was Peter J. Snake LaPointe. My mother's name was Viola Elizabeth Rave LaPointe. My grandparents were Reuben Harold Snake Sr. and Virginia Grayhair. My family came back to this reservation when I was 2 years old, you know, being put out there to find work, to be able to provide for their families. And like one of the termination policies was to, you know, restrict us to being on the reservation and, you know, limiting what we could do. And, you know, in that treaty signing in 1865, you know, we were told that our education, our welfare, and our health care was going to be provided for us as long as we stayed here. And then they come along with another policy that they wanted to get us assimilated. So people left the reservation for work, and that's what my family had to do. You know, in the early 60s, my dad and his brothers come up with the idea that they were going to come back here to Winnebago and honor that word that was given by our forefathers to be here and you know, thrive and survive here. So they started, you know, in the early 60s and started to try to make, you know, Winnebago a place where, you know, we could live, you know, and abide by our treaty and keep the government, you know, to their treaty obligations. So, you know, it was always just being, you know, Winnebago. You know, I was one of the first kids that went to Head Start when the Head Start program started. So getting that education and in, you know, preschool and then elementary and junior high and high school and learning what, you know, what was in the books. And I went to the local Catholic school, and what was in the books was all the things that they wanted us to learn. You know, you wanted to read about Indian people, it was either Pocahontas or Squanto or Sacagawea, and that was the extent of learning about Indian people. My father and my mother were both brought up in the age of boarding schools. So at a young age, they were taken out of their homes and put in boarding schools. And, you know, being Winnebago, it was, you know, the U.S. government's policy to terminate being Indian. And I don't remember who said it, but I remember, you know, hearing about, you know, kill the Indian and save the man was what the U.S. government wanted to practice. And so at home, I didn't get to practice the language, so I didn't pick up on it. I picked up on all the good, you know, the food words, and when it's time to come eat and everything, but, you know, a lot of the things that I could have been learning, I lost. And so from an early age, I knew, you know, that I was a Winnebago, and we did sing things a certain way. And learning the things that I could learn here, and then carrying that on for my forefathers, trying to keep that word, you know, that was given. And to be here and make things better for my children when I started my families in the early 90s. And then, you know, coming into the information age, and so many of our young people going out and getting educated, and even the people my age starting to write our own books and research and find out our own history, and just totally turning around everything for us made me really proud to be, indigenous to this country, for all the things that, we've done, to make this a place for a lot of people to live. And even though, in my own opinion, European Americans, making this kind of a volatile place to live, from our first contact with them, and the moves and the changes that our tribe has been through, and then finally ending up here in Nebraska, it makes me proud that as hard as they tried to eliminate us, God damn it, we're still here.
Final thoughts?
Just that I appreciate the chance to to share what I've learned throughout my 61 years, and all of the names that I've brought up. I try to tell my family that a lot of these things that I share with my family and I share with people that come to visit me, those things, they aren't mine. They were given to me by my forefathers, by my father, by my clan fathers, to pass down. Even my Degas, they shared a lot of things with me that I share with my sons and my grandsons, and now even my great-grandsons. I try to share all of those teachings and those things that got passed down to me with them and with our people, because in this day and age, with the influence of outside cultures on indigenous people, it's broke down a lot of the things that we were taught as children, American culture, I guess, and breaking down the system that we were taught about what our Degas, and I can't speak for the women's side because I was never taught that side. I was taught the man side of being a Winnebago and teaching, all of my sons and nephews, grandsons, about what I was told and what was passed down to me. And I've seen a lot of that break down in our community, to where, they always told us that if you don't want people correcting your children when you're in public gatherings, then you keep them home and teach them right from wrong. And that was one of the big things, after I started my own family, and I went down to a Head Start gathering, and they asked John D. DeCore to stand up and pray. And John D., he was a well-respected man in this community. And when he got up to pray, all the kids were running around screaming, hollering, and the parents themselves were sitting there talking to each other. And I've seen the breakdown in our Winnebago teachings. And even John D., I've felt sad for us that day, because he was trying to pray and he was looking around and everybody was making noise and weren't paying attention. And here he was, a well-respected man in our community, a spiritual leader within our tribe, talking to God, and nobody was listening to him. So that brought to light for me, the breakdown in our teachings and the way young people handled it. Back in that time, they were saying, oh, those are old ways. But to me, they were Winnebago ways. And that's one thing that our dominant society has tried to take for so many years, over 500 years now, try to take away being Winnebago from us. And, here we are still trying to hold on to that, trying to hold on to that Winnebago way of life so we can honor that treaty that our forefathers signed. And that's what the dominant culture is trying to take away from us, is so when there are no longer Winnebagos or Winnebago ways or the indigenous way of life, then they won't have to honor that treaty anymore.